SEO game has changed, and if you do not know what's to come and how to prepare, it's clear you'll be left behind. Hi, I'm Jaryd Krause. I am the host of the Buying Online Businesses podcast, and today I'm speaking with Eli Schwartz, best-selling author of Product-Led SEO and an SEO expert consultant with more than a decade of experience working for leading B2B and B2C companies. Now, Eli's strategies have generated millions of dollars in revenue for some of the internet's top websites and businesses. He's helped clients like Shutterstock, Coinbase, WordPress, Nile, Quora, Zendesk, and executed highly successful global SEO strategies for many large brands. Now, Eli and I talk about specifically in this episode what has happened through the landscape of SEO, what is going to continue to happen well into the future. And to understand this, we needed to go all the way back to 2011 with the Panda update, what happened there, what that looked like, and how that translates to what's happening now through the 2024 landscape and what's going to look like, as I said, in the future. We also discuss why most AI businesses aren't actually helping users and how Google is. Not throwing many AI businesses under the bus with names, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, some of the big ones that people are apparently using a lot, but in reality aren't. Why Google is actually paving a way forward versus what some of these AI businesses are actually doing. Now, we also discuss why we should be bullish on not just Google, but SEO moving forwards for all platforms. We talk about why it's not about keywords anymore. It's not about creating content that is incentivized in a specific way based on what an algorithm wants or a company wants. We talk about how to create content, not just for Google, but create content for all search engines. People are going to love. You don't need to create for just the search engines itself, and you'll see what I mean. And I give a great example of how people can create this amazing content moving forwards using some of other platforms and how people are addicted to different styles of content to create better experiences whilst consuming content. So now there's so much value in this podcast episode. I know you guys are just going to love it. So let's just crack on, dive straight on in and enjoy. Have you been lied to about how to increase organic traffic and grow your website? I too used to think that all you needed to do is add more content and gain backlinks. But this just doesn't work. More content and more links alone is not the answer. Nor do you need to butcher your website with generic SEO changes you picked up on some crummy online tutorial, leaving with a Frankenstein website that's slow and clunky. And because I got sick of seeing great people with great websites struggle to grow them, I decided to do something about it. I created an SEO service, which is not just about publishing content and getting links. Sure, we offer that. But first, we give you quick wins, which are SEO tweaks we can make to your website that actually boost your rankings. And then we lay out a killer SEO strategy to acquire more traffic and revenue that outranks your competitors with less content and less links. We've thoroughly tested this service on many websites before launching it and have achieved incredible results, which you'll see on our landing page I'm about to share with you. Now you can finally buy a business and give it to us to grow it for you. To check out our SEO service, head to buyingonlinebusnesses.com/SEO-services and book a call to chat with us to see what is the best growth strategy for you and your website. That's buyingonlinebusnesses.com/SEO-services, and the link will be in the description too. Eli, hello. Welcome back to the pod.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me, Jaryd.
So welcome. Mate, I wanted to get you on to talk about all things SEO. It's your bread and butter. It's what you've been doing for many, many years now. And there's some people freaking out about it. All right.
They should be.
Sorry?
They should be.
And that's what I want to talk about. Why should they be freaking out about it?
I think Google's changing everything. And I don't think they want to be, but I think everything we know about Google is about to change with probably in the next couple days to a week.
They have to, right? Like by the time this comes out live, a bunch of changes already been made as of like end of 2023, start of 2024. It's been rolling out for a while. And people on the receiving end of having so much traffic and losing a bunch are not in a good spot and not happy at all. And I can understand why. I can empathize. I've lost traffic and money as well. And forget that Google is kind of forced to make these changes, or they don't know that Google is kind of forced to make these changes because the environment's changing and they need to keep up to scratch to stay relevant, I guess, right? Am I correct in saying that? And how would you explain this?
I think Google is forced into making these changes because the conversation on the internet and in technology in general is just AI. And Google, for many reasons, has to be relevant. They have to do this stuff even if they don't want to. So, for example, Google has shareholders, and shareholders, if they don't necessarily have to understand Google's business, but if they don't appreciate what Google's doing, they'll dump the stock, and then the stock price goes down, and then Google has a hard time recruiting. The same goes with hiring. So if Google doesn't remain as buzzy and cool to work for as they are now, then it'll be hard to recruit employees. So Google's being forced to do something that upends their entire business model around search. So for the last 25 years, search has been here's a list of links, and then they monetize with a list with some ads. They've changed ads a little bit. They'll have, shopping ads, for example, but it's very, very static. The way Google has been has, I mean, it except for design changes, it's the way it's looked for the last 25 years. And then suddenly this AI thing comes out, and all everyone wants to talk about is ChatGPT and AI search. And there's this search engine perplexity, which they're just the anti-Google, and they keep having these articles about how they're better than Google and no one's going to Google anymore. And none of this is true, but Google has to remain relevant. So what they're doing is they're integrating AI into search results. And I think that Google's being forced to do this for the reasons I just said before for their business, but they don't want to do it. And what it means for users is that search will change. The way search looks will change. And what it means for websites is that that change might mean a loss of traffic. And some of this is going to be a good thing, and because it changes the web in a good way. And some of it's a bad thing. And when I say it's a good thing, it's because the way the paradigm of search for the last, let's say, 10 years has been, if you want to generate search traffic, you write content. Like that's what search is. And to that end, people just write content for the sake of content. And not all of it is valuable or useful or even belongs on the internet. And what Google's doing with generative AI is they're summarizing said content. So let's say listicles. There are all these sites that will say these are the top places to visit in Asia, or these are the top backpacks for camping, or these are the top skis that you want to buy. That's not so interesting. It's not even necessarily valuable. But then with generative AI, Google can create those listicles out of all the content that has existed on the internet, and there's your listicle in search. So if all you're doing is creating a listicle and you're not really curating, you're not really adding value, it's just content for content's sake, Google skipping that middleman and creating the content themselves. So that's where I see everything changing. And some of it's going to be in a good way because people are just, again, creating content just for content. And we don't need that anymore.
Yeah, we've got enough content. We've got enough information out there. It's more about us humans getting it delivered to us in a way that is short, sharp, easy, comprehensible, and enjoyable, versus having to go through search something and then having to go through three different pages or four different pages to get the answer before we finish our search. That's what Google has been. And obviously, I mean, people that are using ChatGPT now, I don't use ChatGPT myself personally much. I like to keep my brain pretty sharp and not have to, you know, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I think people are sort of outsourcing a lot of brain resource to ChatGPT, and unfortunately, um, not thinking for themselves and believing a lot of the data that is put in front of them, and it's scary. I think it's quite scary. That's just my little personal opinion. What do you think about that?
I don't think people use ChatGPT as much as everyone says they do. Whenever I've done these like surveys on LinkedIn, everyone says they're doing AI, but most people don't really know what to do with it. So whenever I meet someone in person and they're like, "Oh, AI has changed my life," then I'm like, "So okay, tell me how. Like, what do you do with AI?" And they don't really have a lot of good examples. And I like access to AI, but I can't say that I use it on a daily basis. And mostly what I'm doing is doing a Google search. At times I want Google to summarize things for me. So I'll use Gemini or ChatGPT if I want something more detailed. But I think it's nice that it exists. but it's really hard to shift over to like, this is the way you're going to do things. Like, let's say I'm planning a trip. I don't really want like AI to summarize it for me. I want to see the results. I want to go to the different websites, and I think that's the way most people are going to do things for now. There are aspects of it they're going to rely on, but I don't think for the most part everyone is using it every day.
Yeah, I agree. Uh, and I don't think people truly understand how it works. I don't, and I'm not going to pretend to. And I think a lot of people, just and businesses saying, "Oh, we're using AI to do this," and not understanding how it actually works. But that's not the topic of discussion. Let's stick with SEO and Google. Um, where do you like? I've got so many questions, but I just don't know which one to start with. Like, who do you feel is going to suffer the most in the next few years, in terms of businesses, and why? And maybe we can talk about it could be because of content wise and what that content is leading to in terms of revenue. I know that you are a product led SEO, which I think people that there should be people that have fared well out of this in terms of businesses with great products that are creating content around those products that are providing a great service, and Google can see that, versus somebody that's just creating affiliate content for affiliate revenue with gateway pages and ad revenue. Yeah, so let's stick with that sort of question first. Where do who do you think got smashed the most and should be quite wary in the next year or so, um, of what's about to come?
Yeah, I think anyone that's just writing content towards keywords are they're going to see the largest impact from search results, where they're not providing a service. Like, let's say you're media and you're doing unique reporting, you're doing actual reporting, and you're gathering data. That's content. That's valuable content. But if you're just an aggregator and you're going on like, and again, people do this really cheap with AI, or they'll do it even with humans, they'll Upwork or Fiverr. So if all they're doing is saying, here's my topic, write this article about this and use this keyword, and if that is your entire approach towards content and SEO, then I think you're definitely will be dramatically impacted by search results changing and moving towards higher quality. So there's a lot of that on the internet. Like, let's say in the health space, health is commoditized. I mean, the human body is, there's tons of content about the human body, and it's very similar. My head hurts. Why does my head hurt? What do I need to do to fix my headache? Very commoditized content. What are the symptoms of a disease? How do you fix that disease? What are the treatments for that disease? Again, very commoditized. So a lot of websites that just put together this commoditized content for the human body and on health, they will see impacts from search results. Now, if you have a unique take on it, you have a unique diet that no one else talks about, you're not going to be impacted because you're providing unique value to the internet. So that's where I think everyone, is going right now. Again, no one knows this is coming. Not enough people know this is coming. Search results are changing. Even from a generative AI standpoint, again, ChatGPT, Perplexity, Gemini, all of those search engines themselves, Claude from Anthropic, right? So like all of these search engines themselves, if people can do those searches and say, hey, I have a headache, what are the best treatments for a headache? They can do that search. So if you're going and just doing the search and then publishing the content you found in generative AI, which again, many sites are doing, or they're doing it with, Fiverr, Upwork, you're not really adding value. And there wasn't a solution prior to generative AI. And now generative AI, people can just do the searches themselves. I've actually talked to a few generative AI search engines, and their approach to SEO is, we're going to do the prompts and we're going to take the content that comes out of these prompts and just publish on the internet. And then I've asked them, like, well, why not skip the middleman? Why do you need to publish this and just go directly, like, and let's let people prompt it? And they think that's an approach to SEO. And again, that's an approach to SEO that might have worked 2 years ago, but I don't think it'll work in the near future.
So can you explain that again? They're going to. I just think it's going to be so valuable for people to understand what these AI search engines, these sort of newer ones, or the ones that are being talked about now, and people are starting to use, how they work, what they're going to do, and then sort of what Google is going to have to do to stay ahead of the pack. So can you explain that again? They're having people put in the prompts and then they're just showing the answers.
Basically that. Yeah. So imagine your ChatGPT. I don't want to out the specific search engines for right now, but imagine your ChatGPT and you want to do SEO, which is like it means complicated to even think about. Like, oh, I'm ChatGPT. I'm competing with Google, but I want to be on Google's platform to compete with Google. So that's already challenging to think about. So you're ChatGPT and you want to generate more inbound searches. And let's say it's health. So you create these prompts, which is what are the best cures for a headache? You put it into ChatGPT. ChatGPT pumps out an answer, 500-word answer. And then you take that piece of content and you publish it under, let's say, /health. And then you would want when someone goes to Google, they find your ChatGPT output content on your chatgpt.com website, right? And there are many sites that are actually doing this right now. I don't think that's valuable. If you're doing the prompt and then you're publishing what comes out of the prompt. I think users that are curious about this, they can just do the prompt themselves. So I think the challenge is that there's, let's say, billions of pieces of content that have been produced on the internet, but at least there's some sort of physical aspect to creating this content. And that was it suppressed the amount of content that could exist. With generative AI, there's no more suppression and all this content can just get pumped out. And Google doesn't want to crawl this. And again, it's not very valuable. So we're going to see this change where, hey, this is not really a shortcut because everyone could take advantage of the shortcut and they could even skip the shortcut and go directly to the generative AI and do the prompt themselves. So that's something that's happening, and that's something that I think will go away pretty quickly.
Well, it's really good though, isn't it, for the internet and for us? I mean, we don't need just we don't need people to do our like prompting for us. We're already going to do it in Google. um,
Exactly. And that's sort of what SGE is with search generative experience in Google is, hey, you did a search query and we're turning it into a prompt and then the content's coming out with actual content rather than just search results.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. So you type your search query into Google, and it's just collecting all of that data and then presenting it. Whereas, like, you can go and find that data from the prompt that you put in anyway. You're just creating an unnecessary thing. I guess if it's delivered in a more consumable way for people and people enjoy it, then great. But I still think people today are searching and wanting to look at multiple pieces of data and multiple sites to make up their own assumption, um, to actually get an answer that they feel they can trust. Right? Like, it's not just like, okay, cool, thanks Google, thanks ChatGPT, I believe you in one sentence you gave me, and I'm going to go away and do it. For me, if I'm looking at something like I split my lip open a week ago from surfing and I got stitches in it, cut them out, and I want to make sure my scar doesn't heal really bad. So I've gone away and not looked at just like chat. I didn't use ChatGPT to how to like heal a scar fast. Uh, I don't use ChatGPT. I don't think it's great, and I don't believe most of the things that it shares. And so I was through YouTube and Google, and I watched multiple videos and read multiple things, and not just one. And then I made my own assessment, and I just, yeah, I'm with you. I don't know if SGE is going to be the way forward. So that said, how do you think this is going to look moving forwards? Like, what do you think Google's going to have to do, or may even, of course, this might just be an assumption from you, but how do you think this landscape is going to change? And then what does that mean for the search engines? What does that mean for these AI generative businesses? And then what does this mean for publishers, I guess, or business owners?
So I think Google's going to do a head fake here. I think Google is going to announce that SGE is launched, and then they're not really going to launch it. It's going to be very, very limited because I think there's still a lot of problems with SGE. There's hallucinated content. There's, in many cases, it's not so valuable for users. It just they don't like it. There's complaints already about it. Obviously, the biggest problem for Google is that it impacts ads because you can't have SGE at the top of search results and ads. You can't have both, of course. So I think this is a big problem for Google. So I think Google's going to announce it, tell everyone it's announced. Wall Street, like the hedge funds that make these big decisions, maybe they don't really use Google and they won't really notice that Google, it's not on everything possible. The media will talk about it and they'll say it's on everything, and that's good enough. users will have enough of it that they'll see it's there. And if they want to use generative AI, it'll come straight from Google. They don't have to worry about it going to ChatGPT, which is, again, big concern for Google. I'd say like last year when ChatGPT came out, the concern from Google was that people are going to start using ChatGPT instead of Google. I think that at this point, Google is less concerned about that because it didn't happen, nearly the way all the pundits said it was going to happen. So what I think is going to happen is Google's just going to launch SGE, say it's launched, and then hopefully they'll call off the dogs and they won't really launch it, and search will sort of stay the same. The big thing that will happen is that Google needs to really tamp down on the results, because there's been all these complaints about the quality of Google results. There's too much spam in the results. Obviously, another big problem is that there's too much AI generated content. So they've been addressing that with what they call helpful content updates. They'll continue to do that, and there probably is going to have to be some like big shift towards like nailing all this AI content, because until they really nail it, everyone's going to really produce it and think there's a shortcut. I can't tell you how many companies I've talked to are like, hey, we have this great idea, we're just going to like put these prompts in and then spit out a million as AI pages. Isn't that a good idea? And I'm like, in theory, if no one else knew that, but I hear this once or twice a week, that's like the magic to, secret to SEO growth. So no, I don't think it's a good idea. I think it'll last for some amount of time because it's hard for Google to really nail it, but then it'll go.
Yeah, okay, interesting. So being heavily in the space of publishers running content websites, creating content for value and earning money from ad revenue, what I heard from you there is that Google's going to continue to roll out helpful content updates. And what does that even mean for a publisher? Because there's a lot of publishers out there, kicking and screaming and saying, hey, like, my piece of content, and I guess there's some bias towards it as well, but my piece of content is clearly superior than what's being shown in the SERPs right now. What does this look like for these helpful content updates? I mean, what are your thoughts on that? It's so far for Google to go, right? Like there's a lot of changes that need to be made.
Yeah, I think when it comes to helpful content, most people know when they're not necessarily being helpful. They're just producing content for the sake of content. And Google is going to continue to nail this. What I think about this, and I have a newsletter post on this. So I really learned a lot about SEO. What year is it? 2011. So it's 13 years ago when Google launched the Panda update. So prior to the Panda update, are you familiar with Panda update? Okay. So prior to the Panda update, everyone had this sort of 20, let's call it the 2010s, the 20s, whatever it is, the O's idea of like, here's what SEO is. And there were sites like eHow, where it's just like writing content for the sake of content and just plugging things full of keywords. So SEO is, again, that it sort of sounds like today, but it's that 13-year-old version where oh, here's a great idea, I'm going to generate a bunch of inbound by just like throwing a bunch of keywords and content. And there was even a plugin that I played around with called Caffeinated Content, WordPress plugin. And what that plugin did is it sounds like generative AI, but it's from 15 years ago, which is you take RSS feeds and you'd pull in from different sites these RSS feeds, and then it would use, again, not generative AI, but like it would use synonyms to, like, let's say I use the word podcast, then it changed the word to broadcast, right? So it just takes synonyms and then it mash up the content, merge these two pieces of content together. It was total garbage, right? So like that's like generative AI from 15 years ago. So prior to Panda, the way a lot of websites generated SEO traffic was like, oh, we're going to fill the web up with content because content is good and Google likes content. And that's true, right? Like a lot of sites generated a lot of traffic from just having content. Company I worked for, we were in the automotive space, and our idea was that we were going to have a site for every single car that existed, an entire website, and then all the content on the website would be duplicated across all the other websites. And it worked. We generated tons of traffic. Then Panda comes out February 2011. And that was when Google incorporated quality signals into the content. So you couldn't just have content and just hope to get traffic. Google would say, oh, this content is of low quality. A lot has come out since then. It's similar to Quality Score, like the algorithm is similar to Quality Score for Google Ads. that it doesn't match the keyword and the click-through rates are very low. And then if you didn't achieve a certain Panda score, they basically demoted you or removed you from the index. So that's what happened 13 years ago. I think helpful content is the same idea, but advanced 13 years, where now they're using AI signals to say this content based on these signals is of low quality, or based on the user engagement is of low quality. And if you didn't achieve that, if you don't achieve that benchmark and that baseline of what good content is, removed from the internet or demoted significantly. So that's the idea. So I don't think this is really anything new. It's just that Google invented the Panda algorithm in 2011, and then it got obsolete because generative AI figured out how to get around all those signals. So Google's updated essentially Panda to identify what again is low quality and remove that again from the index. Now it's going to, now because generative AI, things move so much faster with this cat and mouse game where you could figure out what Google identifies as unhelpful content and then just hide those signals, and it's going to keep going round and round. And there's a lot of like blaming Google in the media. Oh, Google results are terrible and look at all these things and Google can't beat it. Google's doing, to defend Google, Google's doing the best they can in an environment where everyone's trying to take advantage of them. And, they catch it and then the sites move ahead. So to be fair to Google, this is not a static environment where they're just, sitting on their haunches and they're not able to keep it updated. This is an environment where they're playing a constant game of whack-a-mole. So I don't think Google results will ever be great, but can you imagine what would happen if Google really didn't
Yeah,
update things? Then it would look
it would
terrible.
be terrible. I mean, there would be so many, when you think about it, there'd be so many generative AI companies just spitting out absolute garbage, and everybody, it could not be good for the internet, really. I mean, Google's actually really, if you think about it, paving a way forward for everybody versus like these companies, not to put ChatGPT under the bus or any other of them and name them, but where they just go, oh, we're just going to scrape the internet for data and then put it in front of you. Well, Google's already sorted that problem out in their own system internally. Now they're actually making it better so they don't have to worry about all these scraping tools, I guess, or scraping businesses. And what I heard you say is, and the way I interpret it is that, you know, back in the day with Panda, you could just keyword stuff, and then you'd even have people that were putting keywords in with a white background and white text, and doing a bunch of different things, right? Where the incentive was to have a lot of keywords, and the incentive was like, if you do these certain things, Google is going to rank you, and then people would start creating content for Google. And also, then you got, this is where, the black hat, gray hat, and white hat SEO sort of started to come in, where people would be like, cool, we're just going to do a bit of like white, we're going to be mostly white hat on the outside, we're going to do a little bit of gray hat as well. And they would play a game against Google. And I think that's what has become very apparent for a lot of bloggers that are making money from ad revenue and affiliate revenue, is that, and even people that with product businesses as well. Uh, I'm going to play a game with Google, and I'm going to try to beat Google to get ranked higher with my content. And at the end of the day, Google is the boss. Google is the one that's creating the rules, and they can change the rules on you at any time, right? So I think people have come into this space not really understanding that concept, and are really like, oh, well, what happened? Like, this is, you can't just change the rules on me. Well, it's their game, and they're setting the rules. So I think it's important for people to understand where our place is as publishers, and where Google's place is as the company that's helping you rank. If you give them what they want, if they and what I'm curious now is, in the future, what sort of incentive are they going to share with people, that what is helpful content update, and the lines are pretty blurred, for a lot of publishers not knowing what the incentive is. And I think it's like anything. When Panda came out, we're going to have to revisit and readjust and think about, all right, what's the new incentive now to make sure we can produce content that Google loves, so we can get great traffic to our site. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I like to think of it as like a three-sided marketplace where you have the users, you have the website, and then you have Google as the broker in between. And you really have to understand the mindset of this broker, which is satisfying mostly the user. So if you're coming up with some sneaky hack that you're able to benefit from Google, but it dissatisfies the user, then Google is incentivized to make sure that that doesn't happen, because what Google wants, from a broader perspective, Google needs to make sure that everyone continues to do searches, because the more searches you do, obviously their growth, that goes and continues to get bigger. But the more searches you do, the more likely you are to click on ads and tell other people to do Google searches. If people have a bad experience and you do less searches, and then maybe you go to Bing or maybe you go to ChatGPT. So when anyone's coming up with like hacks for Google, that's the wrong approach. You need to figure out how to come up with ways to satisfy users, because that's what Google wants to do. So if you're satisfying, that's part of my product-led SEO approach. You're satisfying and building for users, because ultimately that's what Google wants to do. Today, Google might not be great at or finding exactly what you've done to satisfy users because of, what deficiencies in the algorithm or competition, but that's the direction they're heading. So if you're building towards satisfying users, you're aligned with the Google's future direction regardless. But if you're finding holes and loopholes within the Google algorithm, you're not aligned with the user, and Google will eventually close that. And then you need to come up with another strategy to find another loophole in the algorithm. So the best thing to do is really understand Google's incentives, which are satisfying users.
Yeah, absolutely. So then, how do we satisfy users moving forwards? Like, what do you think, or what do you feel is going to yeah? Before you answer that, I mean, there's it sounds like you're pretty bullish on what Google is going to do and make changes to make the internet a better space versus like what a bunch of these other AI companies are going to do. So for publishers that have always ranked on Google and made money through organic traffic from Google, that's a massive positive, knowing that moving forwards things could change and they could still work with Google to get a bunch of great organic traffic versus I just need to go to, you know, build traffic channels of traffic from other places, which is a smart idea for diversification of traffic, but I guess it's really a settling thing for people moving forwards, knowing that Google is working to stay on top and produce the best results for people's searches. So then, what do you feel those incentives will be moving forwards, and how people should start thinking about, when everybody says like, oh, you just need to make sure you've got valuable content that's not spun out by Google, by AI. How do you
So
see
I
this?
again I think, yeah, I think the SEO focus is in the wrong place. I think the SEO focus should be on the user and not on the platform. So the Google is the platform. So if you are building for the user, and what that means, and a question I thought you were going to ask is like, how do you build for the user? All right, so thank you for asking, Jaryd. The question, that's a great question. How do you build for the user? So the way you build for the user is you talk to the user, you understand the user, you know who that user is because you're selling to them. That's who pays you, or that's who consumes your content, and that's who returns, and that's everything you've done. It's like if you have a store, um, let's say you sell retail goods, you're selling shoes. You know the shoes that your user wants, and if your buyers don't want the shoes that you stock, and you only stock the shoes that, I don't know, look good with the paint on the wall, that you're not going to sell anything. So you understand your users, you empathize with them, you talk to them, you learn from them. So that's what you should be doing. Now, and the way to be successful in SEO is to be independent of that platform, which today is Google. Tomorrow it might be Meta. Meta is actually working on their own generative AI with WhatsApp and Facebook and Instagram. And maybe the next day it becomes Amazon, who also has generative AI. Or maybe after that, Apple decides that they're not going to have a deal with Google and they're going to build their own search engine. Or, we can continue going down there. Or maybe Bing finally explodes and like everyone uses Bing. So if you're like dependent on this platform, which today is Google, and then the platform shifts on you, now you need to find other hacks to like be successful at Meta and successful at Amazon and successful at Apple. But if you're aligned with the user, that's what all these engines want to do. So whether it's Apple, Meta, Google, doesn't really matter. They want to best bring the user to the place that they're looking for, whether that's a website or search results. So align with your users, and the platforms ideally will serve both. Well, it will serve the user to bring the user where they're supposed to go, and will serve you because you're trying to serve the user.
I love that. I love that answer. And then people are going to say, how do we, what does that look like aligning with our users? And I mean, what I hear you sort of say is be in the space, be the expert, like what Google sort of brought out with the EEAT is like, be the expert in the space, because then you're going to know what your clients' wants, needs, and users' wants, needs, fears, frustrations, desires are. You're going to speak their lingo, you're going to speak their language, you're going to be able to have puns, crack jokes through your content. You're going to speak to them in a way that is like, this is definitely written by a surfer, or this is definitely written by a professional tennis player, or this is definitely written by somebody that knows how to create beef jerky, or whatever it is. Um, that content, you see that work so well on YouTube when people are in the space, so well on Facebook, Instagram, you know, where you get your friends that might be sharing reels or sharing videos with you, and you're like, yes, this person gets it, and it just hits home with those. And maybe Google and all of us content publishers that are creating written content for search engine results, whether it's Apple, Facebook, Google, whatever it is in the future, needs to take a leaf out of the books of how YouTube and TikTok and Instagram and Facebook are presenting content that users are like, yes, I love this, because people are addicted to that content on those platforms, but they're not addicted like they're not addicted to that content like they are in search results. So it's very interesting. I'm only just saying this out loud and thinking about it now. What are your thoughts on that? Is that, should we be taking a leaf out of their book there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to understand users. And now, to be fair, like there are a lot of times where you can't understand users because you're not one of them. You have a website for surfing and you're not a surfer. Well, then you need to understand surfers. And I think that that's the case where you want to imagine how you would do things offline. If you have a surfing store and you don't understand surfers and you denigrate surfers that come in, no one's going to buy from you, and you're going to have terrible reputation. So get into this space, force yourself to understand it and write from the user's perspective. And don't write from, again, the way most people mess this up is write from the search engine's perspective. Like, oh, I know I need to use these keywords because SEMrush Ahrefs told me to, instead of I know I need to use these keywords because I had conversations with potential buyers and I looked at their
Yeah.
history and I know that's what
And
they
that's what
care
they're
about.
saying. They're the questions they're asking. That's how they're the words that they're using when they're describing something as well. And to add to that, people are going to have a bit of like, well, I don't want to have to become a subject matter expert. I want to, maybe buy this business or own this business and not be the subject matter expert and have to do all the writing. Well, yeah, of course. But Google's already shared with you that like you need EEAT on your site. We've talked about it a lot, where you can hire people that are subject matter experts and have careers in a full career in surfing, or have been in surfing for 10, 20, 30 years. They can write the content and actually have them do it, not just have AI create the content, then you have somebody else like do a little bit of editing. And I've mentioned that people can do that as a hack in the past, but why bother now? Like, when Google will be able to determine and see that, like, okay, cool, this is not really people. Google's going to see that people aren't resonating with that or staying on that page long enough. If you have an actual, I know that if a surfer wrote something great that I really appreciate, I'm going to read it and I'm going to stay on that page a lot longer, versus I can tell as a human far better than what Google can, is that this was written by AI and then a surfer maybe edited a couple of things in it, and it's not really something that lands with me, right? So
Exactly. Right. You want to really put yourself into the user's shoes because you're working and you're writing for the user, and that's who you care the most about, and not Google. And I think that's like EAT is just a way to um and capture that idea of understanding the user, but I don't think there's like any EAT score.
yeah, that's right. I'm with you on that. Like, how do you really score that when the age level uh versus like how much time, how much time they spend on the page really, like at the end of the day. So there's a really good answer for people, is like moving forwards with content is either, become the subject matter expert. But what I would suggest, if you don't want, is really having amazing people that have full careers that know the audience that they're talking to, create incredible content in the style, dynamic, and way that is people are going to want to read it. Like, it's just juicy. Maybe instead of um, teaching people to like teaching writers to research certain things around a subject and then create that piece of content versus of having a keyword, and then you need these four things that you need to research, and then a writer puts that into and creates content. Flip it on its head and go find a professional that is not maybe the best writer, but that's okay. Like, teach them a little bit of writing skills, help them with that, but teach the expert first. They're an expert first and a writer secondary. I think that's really going to be
Absolutely.
hugely beneficial.
And I don't think keywords are as necessary anymore. And I think that's really important that we wrap up with that. But like, keywords aren't necessary anymore because we live in a world where generative AI is rewriting or writing content from scratch, regardless of the words you use. Like, you can prompt a generative AI and say, write me a blog post about, how to live a healthy lifestyle. And then it will use all sorts of words that you didn't put in your prompt. So we don't necessarily need to use keywords because Google has AI baked into it. It can understand synonyms and related words and topical intent and all that. So again, it's not about nailing it from a perfect like SEO score. It's really about nailing it for the user. And I think that's the most important.
Perfect last words, Eli. I love that. Thanks so much for coming on. Where can we send people to learn more?
So
about
check out my
what you're up to,
newsletter,
what you do?
product-led-seo.substack.com or elisnewsletter.com. And then if you haven't read my book, Product-Led SEO, obviously when I wrote it, I didn't know anything about generative AI, but it is more applicable than ever because my book is all really about understanding users and building products toward users. And generative AI has changed the way we're going to be discovering content, but it really puts the focus on users. So if you build product-led SEO, you are inoculated against future Google updates because, like we just discussed, Google is trying to align with users. So if you align with users, you have aligned with Google. If you align with Google, you could be pretty screwed if the platform changes.
Yeah, absolutely. Love it, Eli. Thanks so much for coming on. Really appreciate your time as always. And everybody that is listening, please do us a massive favor. Both Eli and me, we spent some time creating a great piece of content. We're both experts in our field, and share this podcast episode with somebody that has an online business. They need to know this information. They need to be ahead of the curve, and they need to know what to do, not just for their users, but for the internet to make it a better place. So please share this podcast episode with fellow business owners and help us spread the word.
Thanks, Jaryd.
Thanks, guys.
Hey YouTube watcher, if you thought that video was good, you should check out this video here on the 2 best types of websites beginners should buy. Or check out my playlist on how I made my first 100K from buying websites and how to do due diligence. Check it out. It's an awesome playlist. You'll enjoy it.